So generally what we do in this is a concluding session, and we call it the Great Debate, which means that we're going to have a debate and discussion on many issues. There is no structure as such, and we'll keep kind of shifting from one issue to another, and depending on the interest on the floor, and also would like to invite everyone to participate in it. So if I may start this, general discussion on, we have a panel, but at the same time others, participants are also encouraged to participate in it. If I may just go for a general first thing, and it's a very simple thing. We need to, what's the future of energy? How things are going to look like? Many of us, we take it for granted, but there are challenges. There are challenges in terms of economic, there are challenges in terms of technology, there are challenges in terms of policies. Now, so what is, when you look at it, and there are political and geopolitical challenges. If I may start with you, Ray, on this, and since you know India very well, and of course your country is the largest economy on the planet, if I may start with you, and we're all going to keep our questions and answers as brief as possible so that we can involve as many people as possible. So, future of energy in terms of the constraints, but more in the terms of that is available to everyone and is affordable.
Well, I think what we've seen today and yesterday is the future of energy is not really constrained by technical matters. I think that those can be overcome. But the constraining factor is really public policy, and that has to do with politics and governance. And in that regard, it seems to me that the future of energy will be determined by what the world, what India, what the United States, what China, European Union opt for in terms of how they will deal with the energy problem. I happen to believe that a strong market component is absolutely necessary, even though it has pains in it, to be able to solve the conundrum that we have in energy. That doesn't mean that markets are perfect or work without public policy, but it does mean that policymakers, whether they be in terms of geopolitics, what happens with the West Asia versus India versus China, or whether it be happens internally, need to look to how to perfect and make more perfect markets, and have in mind not what the narrow perspective is of how those markets would work, but what our overall goals are. So if we can, as human beings, be able to grapple with that, I think that, and treat it in a logical fashion, I think the future of energy is very bright. I think that we can do this. On the other hand, if we descend into tribalism, into faction, into the reactive instincts of mankind, if you will, which has been shown over the centuries, then not only the future of energy, but the overall future upon which the future depends, namely energy, is very dark. Now that may be an overly philosophical way to look at it, but it seems to me that we've heard that time and time again.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rista, we all heard you very attentively yesterday, and especially when it comes to the price of oil tomorrow in 2019. So I invite my friends from here in the room. Mr. Ristad is one of the best-known experts on crude prices. Any question from that side? If you have any question for him? No? You don't want to know the future of petrol price? Mr. Batra. Yes.
Please tell me the inside story. Are these prices really market prices or are they manipulated?
Sir, if they are market prices or?
Please tell me the inside story of the price of oil. Are these really market prices or are these manipulated?
No, I think it is market prices. I think you can try to manipulate them for a short time, and then often it backfires if you try that too long. So I think the learning is that you cannot really, you can try to influence the prices from taking your own actions, but eventually it's so big market that eventually you will, as I said, you will have to. If you get too low prices for a short time, then it will be too high in the longer term. You know, so sometimes the consuming countries try to influence the prices from their side, and sometimes the producers try to influence from their side. So, but actually, I have one comment on the long-term energy also that I think is what I think could work. Is also related to pricing, but that is related to carbon pricing, and I think it was very unfortunate actually that the Paris Agreement failed to introduce more a global scheme for carbon pricing. I think if that was modest, gradually step up of carbon pricing from a few dollars per ton to maybe $50 per ton, maybe up to 100 in 2030s, if that was predictable for all visible, then I think actually the market will fix the rest if you were able to introduce this scheme. And I think then we would actually have a very kind of bright future to balance the needs from a climate perspective and for affordable oil, and then basically let the market basically fix kind of this transition that we are facing. I think it's still some technology issues also that we need to resolve, especially storage from renewables, how to store that, and I think the solution is different from the different countries also. So that's also one comment I wanted to give. Yeah.
You see, like Mr. N.K. Verma yesterday during the conversation on oil, Mr. N.K. Verma is Managing Director of ONGC Videsh. He made a remark, he said this, and many do that, still do that this climate change, global warming is a natural phenomenon. It's nothing to do with oil, nothing to do with fossil fuels, and it's just natural thing, and probably over a period of time it will just go away. And the earth is used to it. Earlier used to be volcanoes and other things, other kind of eruptions, and now it's maybe petrol, diesel might be playing some role, but it has nothing to do with it. How many of you in the room agree with this kind of argument? There's global warming, climate change, nothing to do with oil and gas or air contamination and all that. It's just very natural. How many of you in the room, please raise your hand, those who agree with this? So Mr. N.K. Verma is alone. Interesting, very interesting, very interesting. If I may just ask one question to you, Mr. Batra. This idea that India should not be building any further coal-fired power plants, no coal-fired, which means that all the power plants which we have got and all which are under construction, they of course will keep on functioning. And typically the life of a coal power plant is between 30 to 40 years, am I right?
Officially 25, but it goes on to 30. And
okay, 30 years, which means in 30 years from now, let's say by 2040, 2045, we will not have coal-fired power plants in the country.
No, what we gave in a national electricity plan was that coal-fired stations up to 2022, not a single megawatt is required because there's already a lot under construction. It'll easily meet the demand. What we said after 2022, we would require some. So it actually all depends on the economics. Suppose you have solar, wind in combination with battery, which will meet the entire demand, which means batteries which can store power over 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours economically. If that happens, then we will not require any. So we've left it to that. We've not said what will be required after 2022. After 2022, what we've said is we require so much capacity to meet the peak. Now, by whatever means we meet the peak is fine. So coal-based stations which are already in the construction, we want them to, I mean, we don't want them to stop midway because a lot of investment has been made. But to think about, of course, we'll have to think now if you want to set up a station after 2022 because it takes 4 years to construct. So we have said actually, we did a study of optimization of cost by 2030 just recently, which we've not yet put into the public domain. It's under state of finalization. But what we've seen is that we do require about, from 2022 onwards, about 75,000 megawatts of coal to meet our demand by 2030. But there's an interesting thing, batteries have come as 50 gigawatt hour, which means 50 gigawatt hour battery would be used at that time to balance to some extent. But it's not full, it's not enough to totally replace coal. So that's a study which is to obtain the least system cost, a combination of coal-based as well as battery. And of course, given the constraint in gas, domestic gas that we have, it doesn't pick up any gas for capacity addition in future. That's because of the pricing that is there. If the prices change, of course, it would take. So we made some assumptions about reducing battery prices. Battery prices of $160 per kWh by 2022 and $100 per kWh by 2030. So given these assumptions, which we'll make clear, and I think they're pretty accurate, these assumptions. So that's what we feel.
Well, Mr. Mathur and Dr. Balyan, the questions to both of you. I mean, you can see, it seems everybody keep on saying that not sufficient gas, and gas probably, I mean, if I may put it a little bit more crudely, they say gas has no future. So in the sense that since it's not available at affordable prices or administrative price.
So I put a counter question to you. When you buy clothes, do you go for the cheapest cloth, or you look for quality, you look for durability, you look for reliability? So my question to electricity producers is, do you want reliable power, you want quality power, or you want the cheapest power not available to people? That should answer you whether gas would find a place or not.
I think electrons which are produced are the same, whether they are produced by gas or by solar or by coal. So there's no difference in quality of the electrons. It's only the grid reliability which gets affected due to renewables, for which we have solutions. So I don't think we can compare electrons with clothes. And we get equally reliable power from coal as well as from all other sources. So we don't really feel that there's a certain quality about electrons generated from gas-based power plants.
Just to add on this, the government has very clearly indicated and given its plan that they want to transition India to a gas-based economy. Now, when you talk about gas-based economy, the two major consuming sectors of the gas are power and fertilizer. Now, if power is not happening, surely I think this gas sector has minimal chances for growth. But we must see that what's all happening around us. Our two small neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh. Pakistan, the energy mix consumption is 50% gas. Bangladesh is going beyond 70 now. And if you see their power generation, and not only our neighbors, I think most of the countries, gas and power move in tandem. is the cleanest way of generating this thing, efficient way also, keeps and gives advantage of variations also. And I don't know why it's not happening here. The pricing, to my mind, I was talking to Mr. Batra, when we talk about price, it should be right price, and there should be differentiation between cheap price and the right price. If you're not paying right price, you're not paying back to the source also. So the pricing requires a thorough analysis. What is the right price of that?
Right price. I think competition is the answer. Genuine competition. If I may just change the track a little bit and we come back to that is, and my, Mr. Sanjay Singh, and the same question will go to, same question will go to Mr. Rajiv Sikri. You heard this morning, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, his very candid, very honest view on development in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a very important country for India. It's important, it's a home to Mecca, Medina, it's home to, probably the largest reserves of oil in the world, and we have millions of Indians working there, living there and all that. My idea, you are all friends, so my idea is, don't get me wrong, but I just want to have your take on his views.
Thank you very much. I won't answer the question directly. What I'll say is that as practitioners, as governments, you strive for an ideal world, but you deal with a real world, firstly. And secondly, your answers to anything are not in black and white, they're in shades of gray. So when you deal with things, you have an ideal in your mind, but you deal with reality. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed is former ambassador and a diplomat, but at the same time, he's more of a scholar now, intellectual. So I like his views. Often I disagree, or sometimes I disagree, but I like his intellectual honesty. Mr. Rajiv Sikri, you're both good friends, but I just want to have your perspective.
Well, I think Talmiz gave a very brutally frank assessment of what is happening in Saudi Arabia. And I think we should listen to that carefully, because I think the Saudis today are overcome by hubris, and they do not recognize the fragility of their own society and country. If you look at it in a longer perspective, I certainly see Iran as a much stronger and more stable power in the region than Saudi Arabia. It has so many other attributes which are not going to go away, notwithstanding Mr. Trump. And therefore, if we're looking at the real world, at real politics, this balance of power will shift in favor of Iran. Maybe 10, 20, 50 years, I don't know. But you can't take it away, just as you cannot take away what India is. On another issue which was discussed, and that is the future of energy, one thing which has been missing in large measure, I mean, we have discussed it here, but not enough, I believe, is the new technologies and the role of non-conventional energy. Because it's very difficult to predict what the new technologies are going to be like, a few decades from now. Even 2 decades ago, did you think that you would get LED bulbs at this rate or solar panels at this rate as we are today? No. Have we even thought of how we might be able to get energy from the air? I mean, we talk about solar, we talk about wind, but there's just the air, and the energy is there. I mean, in 1945, when the nuclear energy came into being, what was it? It's the splitting of the atom, which was inconceivable at that time, before that. So I think that let us not think so conventionally. And finally, I would like to say that for India, we need an integrated energy policy. Everything is so divided here. We don't have one unified view. There are half a dozen ministries dealing with this. We still don't have an updated integrated energy security policy. We don't have enough incentives for R&D to develop new technologies. I think we are also not focusing enough on climate change and what would happen if say the Arctic opens up, you know, the whole game changes. So if we are looking at it in a futuristic sense, then let us not assume a linear path of growth.
Thank you very much. The gentleman there from, you want to say anything? Please.
This is Majid Al-Harbi from Saudi Embassy in New Delhi. I would like just to thank our gentleman here that he's spoken about the Saudi Arabian and Iranian roles in the region. There is no comparison between Saudi Arabia and, I think in my own personal view, there is no comparison between Saudi Arabia's efforts and Iranian efforts in the region. We are all witnessing plenty of destruction from the Iranian government towards the region. And also, always Saudi Arabia has been helping the region, helping the international market to have a very stable market regarding to the oil prices, regarding to the oil distribution around the world. This is a small comment. And I would like to thank him for his own personal view on that matter. Thank you.
Thank you much. Very well. Thanks for your very valuable contribution. If I may come to you very briefly, Carol, just one thing. In terms of, natural gas in particular, and the role of France, since you have that, France has a great experience, you are also energy deficit country. Is there some experience that you have in France in terms of bringing gas from wherever in the world, including Russia or other parts of the world, that you think can be useful for countries outside the European Union in terms of securing energy for future?
It's a very good question. Well, I think in France we are in a favorable situation when it comes to gas because we have a quite diversified importing mix. Of course, 25%, less than about 20% coming from Russia, but also we have direct import pipelines from Norway, and we have 4 LNG terminals, and also importing facilities for Algerian gas. So we basically have plenty of options, and we are in a position to choose which gas is the cheapest and import this gas. But the second advantage that we have is connections with other EU member states and the development of hub trading and wholesale markets, which of course contribute to lower prices. I don't know exactly what are the opportunities to build more regional markets here. I completely understand that investments in infrastructures is the key challenge. Of course, it took decades in Europe to build the internal gas market, and I think we have reached a point where we have sufficient infrastructures compared to our demand, but of course our demand is only increasing very slowly, whereas I understand that in here, but also in other emerging countries, demand is growing by, at a very fast pace. So, of course, the situation is different because the needs are more urgent in terms of infrastructures. Well, I guess the only message is that you need strong planning exercises and stable policies to make sure the investments come on time. But of course, it's an easy message for the public authorities, and
Thank
the
you.
rest is implementation.
Thank you very much. Just last, and then we'll close. Mr. Ashok, if I may come to you. When we look at, future is in Asia in terms of energy. India, China, ASEAN countries, and down to Australia and others. But it looks like, the general impression is when I hear that it's actually the future, at least in the short term means 30 to 40 years, is going to be dominated by natural gas. In most geographies, most countries, that's how they're looking at it, including western part of the world. Many of us in India look differently these days. Are we kind of realistic, or you think the future is going to be actually completely different from the way, for instance, we are able to visualize in terms of today?
See, I think it's going to be very difficult to predict what's going to happen in a very distant future. World is very uncertain. But I would like to pick up a few things. One is that while it's necessary to recognize the world can never be perfect, but we need to strive towards an ideal situation. I think Mahatma Gandhi said it almost 100 years back that the world has enough to offer to satisfy man's need, but not man's greed. So probably that's, we need more statesmen. That's what I would start with. I think energy scenario, especially in countries like India, I think it has to be much more balanced. I mean, we can't go towards one particular form of energy. I think every form of energy will have to grow. I would tend to pick up the phrase which you used, like the magic. I mean, I have seen that in my earlier role when we reached LPG to the real poor people who were collecting, and even one of the governors who is currently a governor, who could relate to this, saying that I have spent a good part of my youth in going to the forest and collecting wood. I mean, when you give access to clean energy like even LPG, I mean, it really changed their lives. So energy will certainly change lives. It will continue to change lives. The form of energy could change. But we need to have a balanced approach and not get skewed towards one form of or another, because there are very populistic statements which are being made, but ultimately a growing country like India will need all forms of energy. At the same time, there is also needs to be a recognition around the world that the model that you have would be different from a country like India or maybe continent like Africa, which will have to have a different model. Because again, coming to an LPG example, I used to be a vice president of the World LPG Forum, and people used to discuss in this forum how to use LPG for barbecue and all that in advanced countries. And here I said that people don't have access to clean energy for cooking. People are hunting around for wood and so on. So the recognition has to be there across the world. I think coming back, all forms of energy will grow, and future of energy could be very different. We are talking of technological innovations and so on. But Elon Musk will not be able to change the world overnight. At the same time, we also cannot ignore that fact that world could change, but all forms of energy will have to grow. And in fact, I am today holding a portfolio of a new company which is trying to set up an integrated refinery and petrochemical project, and people are questioning whether we need to really invest this much. And I strongly feel that we need to invest. It is better to be safe than create an environment of shortage.
Yes, thank you very much. You're certainly on the right track. You need to invest. We need to build more refineries in India, more petrochemical plants, no doubt about it. At the same time, invest in future. So, well, these have been wonderful sessions since yesterday morning. We started with the Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, who shared his views and brought to us the perspectives and the policy direction of the Government of India. And over a period of, these last couple of days, we have heard perspective from different parts of the world. Mr. Atul Chandra mentioned that, from all parts of the world, except probably we didn't touch much of Latin America. And, but in my view, you see conferences, and of course, all that views you have shared, all perspective there you are sharing, we are going to share with policymakers in the country. These will be, summarized and then articulated in a language and in a manner that the government understands and government is able to use them. and I will do it personally. I'm also a little bit privileged because in a way I'm part of the system, so that helps. So, but in my view, there are broadly three things we need to focus on globally. As countries, of course, but then we collectively. And the world is talking about it, I'm not talking something new. The transition is going to be very, very long drawn thing. It's going to be a huge challenge for many economies, especially developing countries. Transition is also going to have its own color, its own, culture and its own grammar. Germany might have its own view of transition, France might have its own view, but I think India is going to have its own view and even its own grammar. And China probably has going to have its own grammar as well. So I think we got to appreciate this thing, that transition is inevitable and it's nothing new. Transition has been going on for thousands of years. The only difference now is that the pace is faster, is happening faster. So, and now also especially in terms of, global warming, this and that, so transition is going to be even faster. But even then it's going to take a long time. It's going to take decades. Important thing is while we work on transition, we make sure we don't leave any people behind. If we go for transition and leave more people in poverty, leave more people in darkness, it's not worth it. In my view, it's not worth it. We make everything very safe, but then we have 2 billion people living in darkness. What's the point? So the important thing is that we make sure the energy is available, affordable to everyone, first and foremost. And then we are working on transition in such a way that we are able to do it in such a way that we can sustain the economic growth. Economic growth is actually the real magic. Electricity, yes, but there is growth. How China has managed to pull millions and millions out of poverty in such a short period is magic. How India has managed to pull millions and millions out of poverty into neo-middle class or the middle class is magic. Disruptions will be there. Policy disruptions, geopolitical disruptions, even technological disruptions are going to be there. I think when we hear stories from Teslas of the world and other people who are investing heavily in renewables and other new technology, I think it's fantastic. But we should not get carried away. I see many people, they get carried away. They say, oil has no future, gas has no future. That's not the way how it's going to work. I think it's going to be real transition. The most important thing is transformation, energy transformation. Without transition, there will be no transformation. Without disruption, there will be no transformation. But important thing for countries like India and countries like China, Indonesia, Egypt, the whole of Africa practically, whole of Latin America for that matter, I think it's important that we share more our ideas. We learn from each other. We learn from China. We learn from India, how we're doing in solar in particular. We learn from Saudi Arabia, how they are managing their resources. We learn from Iran. We learn from Russia, from France, and all other countries, and then work it collectively. So I think that's the way forward. Because without energy, there is no well-being of the human race as a whole. So in order to make sure, I think, in my personal opinion, right now the critical word is transition. And when we talk of transition, when we work on it, we don't get carried away. So Mr. Ashok, you are on the right track, keep investing. Dr. Balyan, you are on the right track, build more LNG terminals. We need at least 20 of them in this country. We need more smart grids, we need more electricity. In a country like us, we need more and more on that. If we are able to transform India economically, and we have energy for that, it works both ways. And I think, we need to build Asia in terms of energy, even economically and politically, in such a way that, we all can live not only in peace, but we actually grow in terms of prosperity. Energy is going to play a big effort here at World Energy Policy Summit is, we call it World Energy Policy Summit. Our effort is basically that all countries, we all work together on energy policy issues in such a way that we can secure the world and we can secure the global economy. If we have economic security, we will have energy security. But there is other way to look at it. If we have energy security, only then we will have economic security. And both are very important. So we try to contribute our own way. We hope that for those who have come from different parts of the world and different parts of India, that these 2 days have been useful. It has these things, deliberations and the discussions have helped you to develop new perspectives, and also have helped you to become a little bit more realistic. So the transition is the key. Disruptions will happen, but using the transition and using the disruption, we need to transform India, transform world. I think that's the way forward. People will come and go, political leaders will come and go. But I think the important thing is we use energy in such a way, there is greater economic justice, there is end of energy apartheid, and then we use energy in order to bring countries together. If there's one thing which is actually most global, has always been global, is the energy sector. And this is going to be even more global in time to come.